This is Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I am Siofra Bradigan. So I thought we could see if we could have a little fun today and talk about the element of air. It seems to be the element that people have the most difficulty uh, figuring out how to work with it, what to do with it, and that kind of thing. I was actually asked to teach a workshop on this a number of years ago because of that. And I know I was born with a lot of air, so it wasn't as much of an issue for me because of that. But air is, of the four elements that we work with, not including spirit ether, which is the most refined of the elements, air is the least dense and tactile because you can move your hand through it without difficulty. It doesn't stop you. It doesn't burn you, not directly anyway, unless you're in the desert, that kind of thing. So you can't dig your fingers in it. You can't water anything with it. It's like it seems more ephemeral because it's so less dense than the other three elements. According to Barden, air was the third element that came into existence in order to keep fire and water from consuming each other, because left to their own devices without anything interceding in between, that's what they would do. Fire wants to expand and water wants to contract. And so air helps to keep that space between them so that they can be what they are without destroying each other. It's a sort of an interesting notion in and of itself that air is kind of like the medium of getting along, which is interesting since air is the element of communication. Words are part of the air. So every spell that you say, every song that you sing, you're using the element of air in order to carry that message or that energy of whatever you're doing. So, obviously, without air, we wouldn't exist because oxygen is in the air. Even though most of the stuff that's in the air is not anything that we can directly use, when we have that exchange in the air between plants and humans, where the plants take the carbon monoxide and turn it into oxygen and release the oxygen and use the carbon in order to grow plant material and so forth. And so there's that symbiotic relationship that air has, again, making things work together by keeping them apart in a sense. Um, each part has got its own the need that it has, separate but supplementary. I'm trying to figure out the words that I want to use for this. So the air, the spirit or being of the air is the sylph, and I have met a sylph. In fact, Ian went for a walk above a local park and encountered what he thought was a sylph. I was in the park doing something else. It was like some kind of a march or meeting or something or other. I don't remember what now. But when I was finished, he came and said that he thought he sensed something and wanted to know if I would like to go, or he'd like to take me on a walk the way he went to see if I encountered what he encountered and if I thought the same thing without telling me what it was. So, we started going up. It's one of those disc courses where you play disc golf or what have you. That's, goes on and on. Something I've never done, but looks like a fun game for people who can do it. Um, and we got to this one spot on the trail. I went by and suddenly stopped and backed up. And I said, well, there's a sylph here. And it was by this specific tree, which was exactly where he had sensed it. And so that was interesting that we both got exactly the same impressions in exactly the same spot, which is one of the things I recommend that we all do when we're finding things. If we know someone whose senses we trust, someone who has like a similar kind of ability, then it's always a good idea not to tell them what you've sensed and to take them to where you sense something and see if they get something or what they get. And when it turns out to be exactly the same, I'm pretty confident that there's something there, even if it's not something that can be measured with technology and that kind of stuff. So, the things that move air are going to be the tools that you can use with air. So, um, like in this case, a feather wing of a bird, and so incense becomes one of the things that you do with air, and you use the feather to move the air across the burning incense or sage or sweetgrass or whatever it is that you have, and move the smoke in the direction you want it to. So it becomes both a generator of its own wind or air and a controller of the air that you're using, because you can aim things where you want them to go. And so clearly, feathers would be one of the things that people would use with air. Bells are another one, because if this is one of the bells that I found. It is looks like a Mayan priestess. She's got that kind of headdress. I don't know if you can see that or not. Let's see if I can get that closer. Yeah, so she has this nice knot on the top of her head, which is part of her outfit that she's wearing. Nice little skirt. And I found her, I think, at Goodwill. And I liked the tone she makes. And when it comes to ritual, bells are very traditional in a lot of cultures to announce to the gods, the goddesses, the spirits of the land, the spirits of the place, the spirits that you're working with, that go like, hey, something's going on here. Um, Come and have a look. So it sort of sends out that tone to and attracts attention in this case. And of course, as if you're using it for wind chimes, it also makes a sound that is supposedly not pleasant to negative spirit beings, and especially if you charge it up for that purpose. And we'll get to that particular spell. But sound is an amazing thing, and the human body responds to it. And depending on how we make sound, even someone who can't hear, a person who might be deaf, um, can feel sound because it makes a wave. It changes the very air around it, the sound wave going through it, and actually impacts the body, which is one of the reasons why music is so powerful, because it's utilizing that element of air and using the sound that's traveling through it to actually go through solid objects, including your body, and then vibrate through them and out the other side, changing the tone and changing the waveform and everything else. So sound is a very important property of air. And spring is coming. I associate air with the east and with spring, with new beginnings, with the rising sun. And air is definitely associated with new ideas, the mind, communication, and everything else, at least in the tradition that I'm following, or whatever we call this. I don't know. So, I had gotten some information that I put in to a little short class that I taught when I did the class. And air is definitely associated with thought, communication, travel, intellect, abstract thinking, teaching, divination, freedom, joy, laughter, and beginnings. So those are the associations that I definitely have with air. And it can be a lot of different things. It's not in one single state. It can be hot, it can be moist, it can be light, it can be active, it can be still and quiet. Um, it can be cold because it's air. I mean, depending on the other elements that might affect the air it's going, that's going through it, and that kind of thing. And uh, if you had to give it like a specific quality, a single phrase or whatever to describe it, knowing would be the thing that you would call air. It's, things. Spirits can talk to you through air. You can hear the sounds through the air. You gain knowledge through the element of air because of its associations with the intellect and thoughts and ideas and so forth. It's associated with the mental plane because of that. Um, and so, there's all that. Peralta is the one of the ancient names of the king of the element of air, who's in charge of the sylphs and the other spirits of air that are under his purview. And obviously, animals would be ones that fly in the air. So insects that fly, birds that fly, animals that fly like bats. So almost any bird feather of any kind would be associated with the air, even if there's other qualities that you have for that particular bird. You're going to have the main quality of its ability to be held up by and travel through and with the air and with wind and so forth, and its adaptability to changing direction. And so I think that's another element of air that's not talked about that often, is that being able to adapt to your changing circumstances would be that quality of air, because and doing it quickly sometimes. So in a negative sense, that would be somebody who didn't have any solidified ideas or notions of their own, but absorbed and became everything that was around them. So that would be, poor boundaries, no distinctive way of thinking, no defined method of interacting with the universe, or a defined universe that they're working with, sort of thing. And so somebody that will change everything about themselves and how they act and what they say they believe in, depending on who's in the room with them, would be having way too much air, and in the negative sense, the negative aspects of air. So, I think definitely Mercury would be one of the planets that is most associated with the air element because of its associations with communication and that kind of thing. And the colors, of course, are yellow for the intellect and blue, pale blue usually, for the color that we see the sky as. So when you're using things. But there's a lot of different things that you can use as a tool of air. Obviously, the bell and the feather. You can also use a wand, a staff, an athame, a sword, a broom. This broom goes through and moves things through the air by creating that wind to brush things around. And when you're cleansing a space and you're using a besom for cleansing your space, that's what you're focused on. You're focusing on collecting negative energy that might have accumulated inside of your space, and you're sweeping it out the door. It's one of the reasons why it's pretty standard, if you're trying to cleanse a space, to open the windows to let the negative air out, and then you're letting positive air back in order to fill it up with what you want, instead of having it stay what you don't want. There's an experiment that I came across, and I don't think I've actually tried this experiment. I'd forgotten about it, frankly, but the idea is to learn how to control air in your hand, and be able to get to the point where you can control the speed of the electrons that are moving and create electricity. So from the friction of the molecules moving. So if anyone has done this exercise or does this exercise and succeeds at it, I would love to hear about it. Um, what you need is concentration and an open window or a cracked window so you have some air moving in your space. And you hold up your hand, either your right or your left, like you're holding a baseball, so, cupped in that sense. And then start to feel the air going through the between the fingers and over your hand, through the gaps and stuff, and try to focus on that feeling and see if you can make it go faster and faster and faster. And so it's possible that if you can do that successfully, you could create static electricity or something like that. I think it sounds like a fun exercise anyway, even if it works or doesn't work. Um, so some of the things that you can use air for spell work wise, uh, is blowing your problems away, getting rid of your problems. There's a bunch of different spells that are sort of designed for that idea. One of them is using flour, where you can put some flour in your hand and you focus on the flour, what it is that you want to get rid of. Someone put together a little phrase like the name of your problem, whether it's harassment or anger, if you have your own anger, or if it's a person you're trying to get out of your life. You say, so and so of mine, I do blow you out of my life, air, take it, go, and then you blow really hard on your open hand with the flour, and make sure that the wind is blowing away from your house when you do this. So if the wind takes the flour, it's not going to bring it straight back into your face and, and into your house. So wind at your back, always a good idea. Think these things through when you're doing it. And you can do a similar thing with, you can write stuff out on a piece of paper, then tear it up, and then blow it away. Or if you don't want to litter, because, paper is somewhat biodegradable, but it could be considered litter. You could, again, with the flour or something else, like, some plant or whatever, you can focus whatever that is into the plant, and then you can throw that up into the air. Another way that they didn't mention in the material I had originally put together is evaporation, and we've done that using the fluid condenser, where, because we have a liquid fluid condenser, you can also have a solid fluid condenser. The word fluid is kind of confusing in that sense because we always think of fluid as a liquid, but what Barden means by fluid is a substance that energy can flow through. But anyway, you can take the liquid, for example, and then you focus and put what it is, like sending a message to someone, which is what we used it for. We had that former member of our group who was getting ready to move out of town and was taking some of our stuff with her as she was going. So we started sending her messages through each element. And by the time we got to Earth, she was at our front door, which was kind of entertaining. But you can, put it into uh, the liquid condenser and then visualize as the liquid evaporates into the air, it goes into the air element, and that carries that message through the air to the person. You can do that with each of the elements in, slightly different focuses. But so that's something else that you can do. You can, if you want to, practice the idea of telepathy with someone that you trust and set up a time where you're going to do an experiment. And like you might have, I don't know, shared bells, or just use the wind itself as the vehicle and whisper a message to them into the wind and see if they get it. It could be interesting. And some people might be able to succeed at that kind of thing. And then, of course, your voice is a representation of air because you're creating your own sound waves and they're traveling through the air to wherever they go. So that would be a power of air, would be song, as well as chanting, and anything that moves the air, like drumming um, the bells, and so forth. So, think about what air is really and how it connects everything. I mean, our planet is inside of an envelope of air, without which we would not exist. Obviously, it's protecting us from space, so it's still doing that same thing that Barton talked about between water and fire as raw elements, and it's actually creating a buffer between us and, in this case, the element of space that has no air that we can't breathe. So it's sort of interesting to think about. Um, You can use the idea of air to help you study because of its focus on mental ability. Um, Here they have mental focus. Have a test or presentation you need to focus on, but you just can't seem to do it. Let air help. What you need, a quiet place. What to do, find a quiet place and set your books or materials you need to study nearby. Sit down and relax. Start to take deep, slow, steady breaths. Focus on taking deep, slow, steady breaths. Focus on taking deep, slow, steady breaths for a few minutes. After this, visualize the very air around you start to shimmer with light. As you breathe these deep, slow, steady breaths, visualize that you also bring in the shimmering air into your lungs and throughout your body. Keep breathing until your being is shimmering with the same light. When you are finished, open your eyes and start reviewing your materials, confident that you are completely focused. So that would be a way to enhance your mental ability just by using the element of air. So the enchanted wind chimes spell that I came across is kind of a nice little one, because traditionally wind chimes have been used in a lot of different cultures. Anything that makes sound when the wind hits it or whatever, to chase away negative energy, bring in positive energy. You can charge them up for a lot of things. Um, and you put them up in some kind of a breezy place where you will see and hear them. And then you turn to the east and you say this charm. These magical wind chimes now ring out for me, a breezy charm for abundance and prosperity. Merrily do they announce sweeping winds of change and banish poverty and dread. Keep it out of range. Instead, they ring in joy, wealth and abundance, that's true. Lord and Lady, please bless me in all that I do. By the power of 3 times 3, as I will, so mote it be. This is from a book, Cottage Witchery, by Ellen Dugan, or at least adapted from that, according to my notes. Um, and then, another wind chime spell from Scott Cunningham's book, Earth, Air, Fire, and Water. You can be used to guard your home against unwanted guests and negative energies, as well as like the first one, which is bringing in prosperity and so forth. So you get your wind chimes and place the wind chimes on a flat surface in your place of magic, so like on your altar or in a sacred space outside. Gaze down at them, realizing that they're lifeless, still unmoving, because nothing has happened yet. They're just potential at this point. Wave your projective hand over them while saying wind chimes, spell rhymes, spell chimes, wind rhymes, air primes, spell chimes, 9 times 9. I'm not sure exactly why you would have to say that, but something similar. You can probably write your own thing. But that's what he has in his book. And then you lift the wind chimes by the string from which they will be hung and hold them before your face, and then blow against the dangling noisemakers, visualizing their tones scattering and driving away negativity. Hang them outside and visualize that again when you hang them, and let the wind chimes do their work. They recommend that you recharge them every day for 9 days or something like that. And that's to really set. 9 is sort of an interesting, sort of a magical number in Celtic lore in particular, where they discovered that 9 was a magic number before the mathematicians did, so they were pretty tickled. And that's one of the reasons why, like with the healing chant and some other chants that we do them 9 times, because it's sort of on the verge of completion, because 10 is completion. And so you have built up the most amount of potential in whatever it is that you're doing as is possible before it becomes solidified and real. Um, so there's a little thing here too, a feather spell. So like again with feathers being an element of the air or a tool of the air. This one recommends to fill a room with joy and laughter. You can use the Fool Tarot card or a Joker from the deck of playing cards. So if you don't have the Tarot cards, then you're not out of luck. A yellow candle, 3 white feathers, and yellow ribbon, about 18 inches. So with the color yellow as the appropriate color for air in this case, put the card in front of the candle and imagine happiness and joyful laughter filling the room. Light the candle and say, "Old woman, wise fool, joy from you do I call. Cast sadness from these walls and make our hearts light as feathers. Pick up and hold the 3 feathers like a fan, and then you wind the ribbon around and between the stalks as you chant 3 times. From the floor to the rafters, let this room be filled with joyous laughter." And so you're making a charm to hold the energy that you're raising in the moment. And then you can put the fan down on the card to charge it, and then hang the fan somewhere in the room. So whenever you see the fan, you remember what you did. And even if you don't, if someone else sees the fan, it should fill them with a sense of lightness and joy. But even if they don't know what you were doing with it, because, who doesn't like to have some nice little feathers with some yellow ribbon hanging around, right? Seems like it would work for me. And that is apparently from Magical Spells for Your Home by Anne Marie Gallagher. So you can sort of get an idea here of some of the things that you can do with air. And some people do knot spells to tie the winds and keep them from releasing during like the middle of a storm to try and decrease the wind. And then when it's sunny out and the weather is nice, undoing the knot to let some of the winds go back so that they're not like building up too much. If you're going to do wind magic like that, you have to think about what are the potential consequences of your actions, and whether or not you're the kind of person who can do that. That's one of those very specialized types of magic. But knotting is certainly one of the ways to bind something and to hold something. So whatever it is, knotting it up and then untying it and letting it go. So knot magic is like a whole thing in and of itself. So you can look up ways to like summon the wind or whistle up the wind and whatnot like that. There's one in here that was more of a whole ritual. It was not just about air. It was sort of about everything when I put it together. But, since air takes ideas, thoughts, communication, sound, music, and so forth, it's also associated with travel, which makes sense with Mercury being sort of associated with the air because Mercury was associated with travel as well as communication. And so you could think of ways that you could use air to try and not just send a message somewhere far away, but to get something far away to bring you somewhere else, sort of like pull you in a direction or bring something to you that you're looking for. So they have like a bring travel spell in here. Trying to invoke your muse is get your creativity flowing with a little magic. This one uses lavender, so if you're one of those people that are allergic to lavender, I'm not sure what other plants you could use, but I'm sure there would be. This one has dried lavender flowers and lavender oil and something to symbolize your art or craft. So if you're a painter, you could have your brushes or a piece of art you're working on right then. If you're a sculptor, you could have your clay or, part of of a piece that you're sculpting, whatever your craft happens to be, you can find something, even something small, that represents the actions and how to do that particular craft in order to do this particular spell. So you put the item that represents your craft on your altar, rub a little lavender oil on it. So make sure that it's not oil soluble or you'll lose whatever it is. Sprinkle a handful of lavender blossoms over it while you repeat the following words: Muse of art, muse of sound, muse of thought, gather round. I ask for power, for shining light, creativity in this light. And then leave the item on your altar until you found that new burst of creative energy. So, so those are some of the things that I gathered together. Now, me, I am trying to learn how to work directly with the air element. I don't know, maybe on a different level or maybe on the same level as the spells. I'm not sure, but I find that making a tool helps me to um, better understand whatever it is I'm studying. And so this is my air wand. And this is blue kyanite because kyanite, this is the chunk of kyanite that I first picked up. You can't see its color very well. It's a nice blue with a bunch of mica kind of stuff on it. The lights are, yeah, that kind of washes it out. But anyway, it's the first time I picked up that stone, I immediately got what I considered like a refined air, sense of air. It's like air, but like more than just air kind of thing. Like less dense even than air. It's hard to describe. So I definitely had an association with the kyanite with air, and when I hung these, I thought of these like feathers. They're sort of like feathers in the wind, as they will move around a little bit, and so that's what I did. And this is a piece of cherry wood that I harvested locally from a cherry tree, because cherry seems to have a good association with the element of air, from what I could understand. And that's a nice wand of kyanite, one of those rounded, long stones that's nicely polished and so forth. So this is the tool of air that I started to use for when if I'm doing a specific air spell, I will definitely use this tool because it will help to help me tap into that kind of energy, the specific kind of energy. And everything we do, all the teaching, talking, stories, those are really all air association abilities. So, the astrology of the various astrological signs that are associated with air or with Mercury, depending, have that kind of storyteller, teacher sort of energy somewhere in the description of that particular sign. So, since spring is here or coming soon in a couple weeks, I think it's the 20th this year. I haven't looked to be sure yet, though, because it's anywhere from the 20th to the 22nd when we have spring equinox and Stara, which will be the next major holiday, quarter, cross quarter. To be a quarter, cross quarters are the other ones. Yeah. Anyway, equinox will be, you know, the same day either here or in the southern hemisphere, as far as that goes. And there it'll be the beginning of fall. Here it'll be the beginning of spring. So for those who are up here in the northern hemisphere and think about what new things you might want to be bringing into your life, what experiences that you want to bring to you so that you can encourage and grow your own. I don't even know what to say. Apparently, the air is leaving me. Um, what kind of new things, what kind of new experiences do you want to sort of draw to yourself, or what kinds of things that you're already doing that you want to nurture and get more involved in and learn how to communicate better with, sort of that kind of thing? Because it's sort of a broad subject, planting new things, right? You've got seeds throughout the winter months, as you know, the light has been less and less, looking into ourselves and trying to figure out what it is about us that we want to transform into something else, and then going about doing that. This is that time of year up here for that. And for those of you who are in the south, and this is the fall equinox, you're entering into the time of sort of self-reflection and and looking back and seeing what it is that you've accomplished, what you've harvested from the seasons before. So what has been like, the biggest thing that you've been able to accomplish or learn or um, connect with or what have you, and bringing that into the dark with you and then working on it, that kind of thing. So hopefully this has been a little less intense and more lighthearted than some of our other videos, but I mean, I enjoy them too, and they are important. Um, so, whatever you do, decide to do, always make sure that you're following your own intuition and don't take anyone else's absolute word for anything because we're all human and we don't know everything. That's what there is. Do your own research, figure out if this is something you want to do. But the more we can understand the nature of the elements and how they work and so forth, and how they work in our lives and how we might be able to utilize them, the better we will be at just being alive and being who we are. Um, for me, the communication thing is the most important part of the air element. And there are certain times in my life when if things have to go a certain way, I only have to say it out loud and people will do what I tell them to. One of our superpowers that we can have is like, I'm sorry, this is a bad idea. Stop doing that right now. And, or get in the car, I'm taking you to the hospital. It's like, whatever it is, when it's clear what needs to be done, if you say it in a convincing, no nonsense manner with your voice is a power and it can make things happen and people will often comply. So be wise with how you use your voice, right? And try and do good works in the world and make the world a better place wherever you happen to be. So I guess that's probably it for this little video here. And I hope you guys are having a great week. And I'll see you on Sunday for our live show. This has been Siofra Bradigan, and this has been Siofra's Magic Alcove. Blessed be.